Welcome to another HRO Today Educational podcast sponsored by Advanced RPO. I'm Elliot Clark, the CEO of HRO Today. We are the publishers of HRO Today Magazine, HRO Today EMEA, and HRO Today APAC, the producers of the HRO Today Forum series held around the world, and the managers of the HRO Today Association. Today, we're going to talk about talent acquisition and really understanding the differences between what is an expense and investment. And by investment, we mean there is a return in the future for what you do in your talent acquisition programs today. Certainly in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen a lot of wholesale expense cutting, and it was necessary. The question is, when you look at talent acquisition, are you cutting into the fat or the muscle, and what happens in the future? Today's podcast is brought to you by Advanced RPO. They're one of our HRO Today Baker's Dozen leading providers in the mid-market. Advanced RPO's division of the Advanced Group. We're joined today by their Senior Vice President, John Hess. John is an innovator who brings experience as a corporate talent acquisition leader and an operational leader in the RPO industry. John's got extensive experience in both corporate talent acquisition and RPO providers. He's worked for providers like Connexa and The Right Thing prior to his tenure at Advanced RPO. And he's also worked inside corporations for companies like Merck and Icon Clinical Research. John's responsible for operational strategy, solution design, service delivery, and customer experience across all of their clients, and has a lot of experience in change management and assessing the staffing needs of Advanced RPO clients, which include a number of Fortune 1000 companies. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Elliot.
So, John, tell us a little bit, if you would, give us a quick overview of Advanced RPO and the highlights of your firm.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we're a full-service RPO. We provide services primarily focused on the mid-market companies out there, mostly providing end-to-end full lifecycle recruiting for them, in most cases across their whole organization. That being said, we do have some clients that we do provide ongoing support to them throughout the year. We partner with their internal recruitment and HR team, and we actually do that as an example. Maybe we handle the functional area, or maybe we handle certain locations within that organization. But we do partner with the internal team as well. And then we do have some other clients where we actually take on projects throughout the year. They may have spikes depending on what their needs are, maybe for cyclical times through the year, or they may have a new location that they're trying to build out as well. And we take on those special projects as well. But primarily what we focus on is really end-to-end full lifecycle recruiting, and typically it's for kind of across the organizations that we work with. I will say that we really do customize our solutions to really meet the needs of our clients. So not one size fits all. So that's one of the things we do pride ourselves on, that we're able to actually customize these solutions, not just come in and put a cookie cutter type of solution in place and say this is going to have to fit regardless of what. We actually do customize these out really to truly meet the needs of each client.
Well, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your perspectives and Advanced RPO's perspective on recruiting. Now, most companies, because of accounting regulations, they have to record accounting as an expense. But I know you believe that they need to think about these expenses the same way they think about expenses such as marketing or other investments in the future. And in fact, often companies fail to realize that the most expensive job is the unfilled one. So let's talk about why first. Why do companies fail to make the connection between recruiting and returns, and what metrics should they track to help change this perception?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think it's something that's actually starting to change at this time. I think it's always been historically, what's the cost for hire, then looking at time to fill, then looking at some of the other metrics as well. I think a lot of those metrics are more efficiency and effectiveness of the recruitment programs versus what's the return on investment, what's the value they're adding to the organization. So I think you do hear a lot out there, and this has been going on for years. Most companies are going to tell you that our most important asset is our people, our talent. Yet it's interesting, most companies, as you mentioned, still look at that as an expense versus an investment. And I don't think it's because leaders don't want to make that change. I think a lot of it's because they don't have the data and information to actually make those type of decisions. I think it really comes down to all these metrics that are pretty standard for recruiting, and then what's our cost per hire. So I think it's really can be challenging for them to turn that into what is the return on investment? If I'm going to put money into this, what am I getting out of it? So I think it's really providing organizations and their leaders with information and data that they can make those decisions that are going to show them a return on investment, like a lot of other investments they make within the organization as well.
And you're so right that so many of the metrics you use, like the cost per hire or even time to fill, which is a big one. Time to fill is very temporal, right? I mean, that's very here and now. And cost per hire, I've made this point mathematically that if you hire the same job 3 times in a year and you count them each as individual hires, your cost per hire, as your recruiting efficiency declines, your cost per hire declines as well. Because you're essentially hiring more jobs, but eventually it goes to infinity if the denominator gets too big. The reality is that, give us some examples, because in the RPO industry you have to build an ROI justification as part of your bid process or your annual quarterly business reviews. What are an internal TA should learn from this? What are the metrics that you use to create a justification for the ROI on recruiting that can help them build a case for a more robust recruiting program or the use of external service providers such as advanced RPO?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, you mentioned a few of these. I mean, currently a lot of the metrics that are being used are source of hire, time to hire, applicant per hire, cost per hire, those type of applicants, and even ratios, interview to offer, interview to hire, so forth, those type of ratios. And they're important metrics. I think I mentioned that as far as effectiveness and efficiency. But I think starting to look at, companies really, I think it would be very valuable for them, and we're having these conversations with clients and potential clients as well, looking at revenue per employee as an example, looking at performance of new hires. And really, when I say that, there's more to it than just that. It's what is the data that's needed to actually put a quantity on that? How do you quantify that? Number of key jobs that go unfilled, projects delayed due to lack of talent, vacancy days in priority jobs, also revenue producing jobs. I mean, what's the cost of all that? Do companies measure the number of new hires that they're getting that are coming in the door that are their innovators and top performers in the organization? And I know there are some studies out there really looking at many of these studies, and they're all pretty consistent with it as well. I mean, you look at a poor fit in an organization, and that typically is going to actually double the cost. They're usually performing at -2 multiplier as an example. They're definitely not producing at the level they need to for the organization. If you look at a top performer, and we're talking about typically the top 10, 15%, they're performing at a 400% more productive level than the average one. So when you start to break that down, you can start to really take that, as well as some of the other numbers we can talk about as well, and start to really quantify that and look at that. What is the cost per hire when you're looking at that? And then what's the value and the return you're getting for that investment for those individuals? And what's the cost if you're hiring a low performer as well? Looking at a company as an example that may be, I use this low number, $100,000 per employee from a revenue standpoint. Companies, if they're doing on average $100,000 in revenue per employee, which is low. Most companies are much higher. You look at pharma companies, they're usually 500, 600,000 or so. A company like Apple and technology companies, Apple I think is like a $2 million revenue per employee. So if you look at that and just say $100,000 and say, my top performers are performing 400% more productive than the average ones, you have a $400,000 return, or $300,000 on top of the $100,000 return. But it's a huge return you're getting from these top performers, and it's very costly to have the low performers coming into the organization because they're actually not only just pulling down the revenue and the numbers in the organization, but they're pulling down the performance and productivity of others as well. So looking at that, it really, you can take numbers like and really start quantifying that and really turning it into what is the return of investment when they're actually investing more dollars into recruiting, and what's it cost them not to do that. I mean, you can look at a time to fill. I can give you an example of a client of ours. We have a client that we actually went through and rebuilt their process, rebuilt their screening and assessment tools. We did this in collaboration with them, the HR department, and their hiring managers. We went through and standardized all the processes, policies, and procedures and everything. We were able to actually reduce their time to fill by 3 months. So you take 3 months, it's 90 days you're reducing the time to fill, and I can go through an example of what that converts into from a dollars and cents standpoint as well. And if I apply that to this, which we have done for them, that actually converts into over $4.5 million in increased productivity. And I'm not even taking into consideration these multipliers as far as the top performers that are performing at 4 times the level that an average performer would be performing at. So that's probably the minimum there, over $4.5 million, which probably is even higher once we apply the multipliers to it. So just wanted to give you a good example of how recruiting and the investment in recruiting can really pay off and what that return can look like for your organization. So that's something, I mean, there's a number of different data points that we can use here really to turn it into a return on investment and help leaders make better decisions with this.
When you go in and you explain this to clients, and these are the kinds of metrics you should or should not be tracking or that will track on your behalf, how receptive are they to that dialogue?
They're usually very receptive to it, especially when we're using kind of examples and what we've done with other clients. I think the challenge comes into play sometimes when we need some of that information from them to truly convert it into something that's going to make sense for their organization and reflect actual numbers. But it really is in the earlier stages with them and then in conversations with them and really working together with them to get some of that information out. Like the performance of a hire. How do you get that information? We're not going to have that information. We're going to have to get that from the internal HR team. As far as the revenue per employee, public companies, you can get that off the website if you want to. Look at what the average revenue per employee is. Private companies, you have to ask them for that. But then it can vary depending on which department it's in. There's different values it could be in different business units and so forth. So it's information that's out there. Recruiting a lot of times gets added to human resources, and it's another thing that they have to deal with. I mean, they usually have many different strategic HR initiatives to work with, and they're actually trying to do recruiting in there as well. So many times when we go and partner with them, they're very happy. They actually like we're coming in there and taking that off their plate, really allowing them to be more strategic in their HR role. We're taking care of the recruitment piece of it. So what we're able to do by taking this information, work together with them to get the data from them so we can put this information together from an investment standpoint. What is the ROI on this? It's actually empowering them more when they go in and talk to their leaders, get the investment dollars versus the expense, get the investment dollars. And I think it strategically also raises at least the recruitment function within an organization to a more strategic level by doing that. So I think really the clients that are innovative, the companies that are innovative, the companies out there that really want to look at talent and see that as an investment, we really have good conversations with them. We're able to get a lot of information together with them to put that business case together.
That's great, and all great advice. I want to thank John Hess, and I hope people who listen really take to heart. The way you look at recruiting a lot of times will determine how successful you are. Is it something that you sort of got to do and get it over with, or is it something that you're really doing to meet the talent needs of your organization a year or two out? Everyone talks about strategy. How many people really incorporate it into how they view the metrics that they use to measure ROI? I want to thank Advanced RPO. As I said, they're a division of Advanced Group and one of the leading providers on the HRO Today Baker's Dozen mid-market survey list. And I want to thank John Hess, their Senior Vice President, for giving us these valuable insights. Once again, I'm Elliot Clark, the CEO of HRO Today. We hope you found this useful, and we'll look forward to having you join our next educational podcast.